for the presenters. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for coming today. This is an Equity in Action discussion panel, and the general topic of this panel is outside the classroom activities, which is definitely a multifaceted piece, thinking about mentoring and counseling, but also homework, deadlines, assessment and grades, email, Canvas, office hours, and the like. So the panel members here were approached by the PDC to share out some aspect of equity-centered practices that they use with students. These panel members were asked, based on having participated in a variety of equity-centered professional development in the past year, such as attending the National Conference on Race and Ethnicity, also known as NCORE, the California Community Colleges Racial Equity Leadership Alliance, or equity summits and trainings here at SMC. These equity PD opportunities we have as faculty are great, but often the learning is limited to the people who attend, and this great knowledge doesn't get shared with other faculty. I'm so grateful for Jamar really demonstrating and modeling sharing, kind of paving the way for you all this afternoon. We would like to kind of continue to promote this culture of sharing by offering equity share out sessions as on a regular basis as part of PD here at SMC. So just to set some expectations, each panel participant will have 5 minutes to share what they have learned or implemented, followed by a brief question and answer specific to the participant's informal presentation. So we'll have a presentation for a few minutes. Then if you have any immediate questions for that presenter, we'll take a couple of minutes to do that. I do want to make sure that everyone has a chance to share. So if we kind of find that the questions are going a bit long, we may cut it and come back to it at the end of the session when everyone's shared. And I hope that that's okay. It's not that we don't want to take your questions. I just want to make sure that our folks who came here today have an opportunity to do their presentation for you. Okay, so without further ado, I would like to introduce our first panelist, Dr. Paul Jimenez.
Hello, everybody. So my name is Paul Jimenez, and I'm one of the counseling faculty over in Adelante and Black Collegians. And I thought it'd be helpful if I just shared something that I use. Actually, this all came about my dissertation many years ago, and it's something that I just continue to use to this day. And it's the idea that that we're all institutional agents. And what that means is that we all have social capital that we can support our students with. And but a lot of us aren't aware of that. I was thinking of, Jamar earlier today was talking about how we're all leaders. And I also think that we're all, in our own ways, we're all mentors. We can mentor other colleagues, or we can mentor our students. So the idea of an institutional agent is that we all have the capacity to support our students through direct support, or by providing indirect support, by being a bridging or brokering support agent. And if you'll see, there's a bunch of different boxes. I'm not going to focus on all of them because I do have 5 minutes, but all of us here have the capacity to do all of these or many of these. And that was one of the things with my dissertation is I looked at I spoke with individuals who were known for being, like great support systems to our students of color at different community colleges. And what we found out was that the majority of them, fulfilled at least, 6 to 8 of these different roles. And that none of them, it wasn't like they were experts at it. They just, did it by going a little bit above and beyond for other individuals. So I think one of the things that also came out is that these individuals had a lot of empathy. So they put themselves in the shoes of their students. And that really played a big role when supporting those students, because I think sometimes as we get older, and I'm including myself, we tend to forget sometimes of how intimidating college can be. And, we're actually speaking before you guys all got on that it's interesting when we present to our students or teach our students, we're so used to doing it that, we get comfortable and the nerves aren't really there. But then when, we get in front of our colleagues, all of a sudden the nerves come back. So I try to use those feelings of nervousness. I relate to those when I'm working with our students, because it's really real. It's real for them, especially our first generation. Black and brown students. For many of them, they don't have someone in their lives who has gone through the college system. So it's just truly important to try to be as empathetic to the process as possible. In terms of some of the ways I've been able to use this model on campus, I help coordinate the Men of Color Action Network. So we've been able to work with many of our students through that. I also help coordinate the Men of Color Mentoring Program. And then we also have the Brother to Brother, Sister to Sister mentoring programs on our campus. And yeah, I think I don't know if Jessica, is there another slide? So I thought it'd be just nice to give you an example slide in terms of an institutional agent. So idea is that if an agent, or if any of you invite a student to attend a professional conference, then through that, you're able to serve as a cultural guide for that student. You're also a networking coach, because you can connect them with other students or professors. And then also the idea is that you're able to integrate them to a new culture at a conference. So all of these things are things that I'm sure, we've all been to conferences, and, taking, obviously right now we can't do it because of COVID, but the idea of taking a student to a conference is a great way to provide that social capital to help them and give them some extra leverage. And then the next example is, so this would be an indirect way for us to advocate for our students. And this would be, one is an agent advocates for Latino and Latino students in a faculty meeting. So the students aren't there, but we're still able to do a lot for them and, help support them without them knowing it. But in some way or the other, it can make a huge impact in their lives. And it's a real thing that I practice. I'm actually meeting with Brookins tomorrow, because we're trying to figure out if there's a way that we can bring in additional support to support men of color on campus, because our equity data shows that specifically Black and brown students are really struggling on our campus. So we're going to be those institutional agents to come up with a plan on how we can provide those extra resources. So I am out of time, but I can definitely take any questions, and I'm always available. I'll add my email address on the chat. So if anyone has any questions in the future, they can reach out to me.
So does anyone have any immediate questions for Paul, or we can come back and circle back at the end of the presentation if you prefer? But I want to just give a second. Anyone have a question? All right, thank you. Sharyn, you are up next.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sharyn Obsatz. I am not an expert in this, but I definitely am a sponge. So one of my skills is taking sometimes the best of what everyone does and mixing it and using it with my classes. And so I'll just share a few things that I have learned from our colleagues and other places that I've incorporated, and feel free to use and remix. I like to say imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. So some of the strategies I use. So for instance, Professor Sedke presented the fact that, and I didn't realize this, when you're in the Canvas gradebook, if you hit those 3 dots right there, you can send a message to students who haven't turned in an assignment. So now when I have a deadline and the assignment is due, anybody that doesn't turn it in, I send them a message, and I try and be very positive in that message, right? My goal is for everyone to succeed in this class. I left this assignment open so you can finish it. Let me know if I can help you in any way. Sometimes I'll put placeholder points in so that they can see how not doing that assignment affects their grade. But so this has saved me so much time. And basically now, whenever I grade anything, I will message the students who didn't turn it in to let them know that I still want them to do it. Because my overall goal is mastery. And I want the students to really learn the content in the class. So these are all small things. I just learned the term micro affirmations, and a lot of these are just very small ways that you can affirm students. So my syllabus and my Canvas homepage includes photos of successful alumni or experts in your field, right? Depending on what you want to do. But it's just a way for them to see someone who was in their shoes before, who succeeded and has gone on to great things. I changed my class policy on lateness. There's a lot of discussions about lateness. Now I don't require doctor's notes. I essentially, if they tell me there was a good reason why something was late, I allow them to do it. I learned this from an FSI workshop where I add a welcome statement to my syllabus, and I try and communicate that I love this class, I love teaching this class, that I have high expectations for them, and I know that they will succeed in the class if they work hard. I also learned from a colleague about the COVID statement. So this idea of being kind to yourself during COVID, I include this in my syllabus and also on the welcome page in Canvas. But just this idea that we acknowledge everything that they're going through. And I often will tell my students, look, when I was in college, I didn't have to deal with COVID. So you're doing something that I never had to do. So I have a lot of respect for you. My colleague, Professor Blaise Hopkins, suggested that we pick just one class while we're all remote and on Zoom, pick just one class to do appointments with every single person in that class. So you can have general office hours, but also have deliberate appointments. Proactive interventions. So if I see a student who's struggling, I reach out, I'll call and email, and then I also do the GPS survey so that a counselor will reach out to them too. And that way, if there's something else going on outside of my class too, it helps with all the classes. Am I at 5 minutes? Am I almost at 5 minutes? All right. From Professor Chicas's past workshop, they talked about doing this pre-class quiz or doing it in the first week, where you ask them, like, you get a sense of this is their first online class, you get a sense of their learning style or whatever they want to tell you about how they like to learn. And then I have this optional question that they can leave blank, still get the points, but just if there's anything, this is where they tell me maybe about their job schedule, or they're working overtime, or they're taking care of siblings, or their Wi-Fi is bad, or whatever they want to tell me, they can tell me this, and they get points for doing it no matter what they put on it. But it's just a chance. And also students have responded really positively to this because they feel like they're, and I write in the comments after I grade it and stuff. So it's a way for us to begin that communication. I'm going to drop this in the chat. There was also, I just learned about from UCLA, Dr. Cecilia Rios Aguilar did a presentation. And one of the things she mentioned is that there's some research now on racial micro affirmations and just small ways that we can help to counteract some of the negativity that people have to deal with all the time. Last two ideas. So Dwayne Edwards came and spoke, and one of the things that he talked about is in his sessions, he has each student, and he has longer sessions though, he has each student share like an inspirational quote or inspirational thing each day to practice their public speaking. For my classes, I have, like for my journalism class, I'll have each class, one student is assigned to share a journalist who inspires them. Right. And often the students will choose journalists from their same background. So it's just another small way to look at excellence across our field. And then lastly, I haven't done this because we haven't been on campus, but NCORE recommended one of the speakers talked about having some kind of altar or display in your office that honors the ancestors and the people who have gone before you in this field. And so I have not done that yet in my office, but I do have posters up in my office. So these are a couple of posters. This one I got from an event where the UCLA Dreamers were selling the poster. And then this is Ida B. Wells, who was a pioneering journalist, African-American journalist. So it's this idea of doing something to honor the people who came before. So I will go ahead and drop a PDF version of this in the chat. And then also I downloaded this article that I can share in the chat also.
Thank you, Sharyn. Does anyone have any questions? And thank you so much for putting that information in the chat. Got several requests for that. Any questions at this time? for Sharyn? All right, well then, please welcome Greg. Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. I also got a chance to attend this conference workshop, and as Sharyn says, you're always on the journey. And a lot of the workshops that we had, self-selected, had to do with more infrastructure or what is the college or institution doing and how we might make things better in our selection choices of, faculty or hiring committees. And so I try to relate some of that stuff to what we do with the students, be it in the area of mentoring, as Paul says. My background, has been as an instructional faculty, but I've worked really closely with Black collegians since I've been here, as well as Adelante and the Men of Color Action Network. And so when I go through and I look at, one of the statements that really rang true for me was this statement: how can a liberal institution have very few people of color in key positions? So let that sink in a little bit. If we say we're a Hispanic serving institution, how can we only have a few Latinx professors or a few people in key positions that are Latinx? And that begins to present a challenge for us to respond to and change that. Is there some type of dissonance between what we say we're about and what we're really about? And so the challenge to me as I go back to my classroom ends up being, okay, is there something that, as Paul said, as a person who's been teaching for a number of years, is there something that I take for granted that maybe the students don't even, they're not even knowing how to get to that because, I've been teaching for a long time. I've got about 3 or 4 generations of people that have gone to college. And so when I consider that, there may be some things that I already have in my entitlements that I need to start looking at ways to grab people with respect to homework or deadlines or being consistent. And so some years I actually have made, what is it called? I would make office hours a mandatory, I'd call it a meet and greet, maybe the first week, where you give people 2 extra credit points for just coming to see you in office hours and introducing themselves. And people will do anything for 2 points. Like you would think you were giving out Starbucks gift cards. Hey, come by and get this 2 points. And the shy people might come just to do that. But then the whole thing is we open the door for them later to come when they really need something. Because when they really need something, if they don't have that relationship, they may feel like they're bothering you. The other thing is implicit bias. Again, it didn't occur to me until the last 5 years because I grew up here in LA, I'm very middle class, lower middle class growing up, but I didn't realize it until I thought about it. I have a degree, my mother has a degree, my grandmother has a degree, and my grandfather or my great grandfather who was enslaved actually went to what was Talladega College and got a ministerial degree. So it didn't have college degree. So I kind of take that for granted, but it's in the DNA. So I start saying, are there biases that I have that automatically assumes that, oh, people like me who went to USC or folks who went to this high school that I went to, they can cut the grade. So are we doing things that are excluding people by saying we went here, but if they went to Dorsey or if they went to another school, maybe we treat them a little differently. Or if they get there late, they don't want this when we find out maybe they rode 3 buses or maybe they were taking care of little brothers and sisters before coming. And so those are things that I think we need to look at. My final thing is this, professors, watch out for convenience. When they talked about it in the context of, do I have to train a faculty member? And if that's going to be work for me, then I'm not going to hire that person. Are we doing the same thing to our students? Is it more work for me to try to onboard somebody who may be less prepared? And how do I begin that process of really saying, okay, here's how you do it. It is going to be some inconvenience, but it's work that we need to do. And so that's where I'm really looking introspectively. This thing caused me to really look at who I am and what I'm about. And so I'm really looking forward to what Shantae and Tiffany have in store, because I'm really looking for those hard questions to ask myself. and not trying to skate around those things. So I don't have a PowerPoint, but I'll put my email address into the chat if you want to talk more about it, because these are the conversations that I'm really interested in us having as a college, because I think if we start really asking ourselves some of those hard questions, we'll make some change that will be lasting. Okay, so thank you guys so much for listening. I really, truly appreciate it. Thank you very much. I'll turn it back over to you, Jessica.
Thank you so much. Anyone have any immediate questions for Greg, or we can take questions at the end, assuming we have time. Okay, thank you so much. Walter, you are up next.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. It's really an honor to be on this panel. I'm looking around and also the audience, and I'm a student. I see my mentors here that I'm talking to. So I feel a little bit like I'm giving like a student presentation. I'm on the equity journey. I'm committed to it. And clearly I didn't read the email properly because I thought I prepared something completely different. So I thought we were kind of summarizing some of the things we learned at NCORE, that this is a follow-up to that. So let me just start really close with that, and then I'll move on to the topic. There was, three presentations that really stuck out at me. The first one I'll say is when Bambi Salcido talked, one of the phrases she said, "We're building the world that we want to live in." And it was in response to how she's overcome a lot of tragedy and just like attack, right? People directly trying to subvert her. And that goal of like, she's building the world that she wants to live in. And I thought that was really beautiful. And thinking about this college, and we say we want equity, and then what stops us? What stops me? I won't say us. I'll just say what stops me when I put it at the forefront, and then all of a sudden it's not the forefront. It's not the thing I'm considering all other things too. Because if I believe that, I'm convicted when I'm at NCORE, and then life comes back, and then I forget the conviction. And so it's kind of reminding myself of that and continuing to do it. Another one was when Kim Tallbear, she did a keynote and she was talking about the fetishization of Indigenous culture and really resisting people profiting off of Indigenous culture in any format. And it was something I had to really pause, because I was like, wow, that's like, it felt really hardcore to me, because it's like, I thought there was some people celebrating and she was like, no, they're profiting off of our DNA, off of our spirituality. And the last one, I'm forgetting the speaker, it was you talked about, it was about monuments and why we need to take down these monuments. And in it, and during it, I sent him a private message because he had a picture of Banksy's appropriation of a kind of early impressionist French Barbizon painting by Millet of the women gleaners hunched over, and it was a appropriation was a Black woman smoking a cigarette, taking a break. And I was like, that's a problem, because Banksy operates arguably white, and we're perpetuating a stereotype. Without anything, instantly he took it down and said, that's all I need. And I was like, oh my gosh, he's modeling the behavior. And in some other session, I heard someone said, white people are more concerned about being called racist than fighting racism. And it wasn't a general, it was kind of like, we don't want to be more concerned. And so like this worry, like, I call out culture, oh my gosh, instead of just like, I want to fight racism. And so I'm on the team that wants to fight racism. I want to learn. I'm engaged in equity in the sense that I am committed to it and committed to learning, and I'm committed to being okay making mistakes. And that model of like, if someone tells me, hey, that's problematic, I don't need to argue. I just need to take it down or change it. And I've been really practicing language and saying directly, like, I'm so sorry if anything I said came across that way as being insensitive in any way. Please forgive me. That's I appreciate, thank you for doing that. I love you because you're helping me be a better person. And just get out of like trying to justify, well, I wasn't intending that, and this is what I was intending. It's just like, hey, if you felt that way, I just want you to know that's not what I want. And taking immediate ownership. And it's not about being right, as the professor even. And it's sort of strange because I try to, foreground and really put equity into my practice, but then it's like, it gets, it gets like, oh, a student might misinterpret or something and say, that was really sexist or racist by showing all this imagery. And it's like, that was, wow, okay, I need to take that feedback and not argue with the student. I think my time is nearly up. And it's, what's funny is different people have different reactions. So my intention really is so irrelevant, and I'll make mistakes even with the best intentions. And I'll give you an example. I remember it was in Equity or NCORE, they talked about like smiling and making eye contact and being very conscious of not trying to avoid people of color simply because I'm afraid, I don't want to like being in my head and being very intentional that if I'm not including people in a racist society, I'm actually de facto excluding. So if I take that to heart, I have to always be trying to include, and I try to include. And the former chair, rest his soul, Ron, said, you know what, Walter, if I was a kid and I saw you looking at me in the eye and smiling, I'd be like, what the fuck is this guy? And so even that, like the trying to diffuse, it's like, okay, maybe, and I don't want to go into that, I can't win. It's like, no, I want to include, I want to get better, and it's okay to make mistakes, and it's okay that to be vulnerable on this journey.
Thank you so much, Walter. Questions? Okay. All right, Emily. Thank you.
Hi. I feel so grateful to be able to speak today, and I just wanted to thank Santa Monica College for allowing all of us to attend NCORE, because I wouldn't have been able to in the past with my little ones, and so it was pretty amazing to be able to attend such an amazing conference for so many days with so much content. And so I had a hard time wrapping up all that I've learned from NCORE, but when thinking about it, the few words that came to mind from all of the speakers was the importance of community, authenticity, vulnerability, and feeling at home within our school community. And so some ways I know that I can start implementing that right away, and when we get back onto campus especially, but online, having that sense of belonging within our BIPOC communities. And so oftentimes people of color, and especially men of color, they show up, they enroll, and then they don't finish. And why is that? Why are we losing students? Is we want them to feel at home. We want them to feel that community support. Just like, I use this as an example, just like if you were having a family gathering and one of your family members didn't show up, you would reach out to them and say, hey, is everything okay? Why weren't you here? And we should have that same empathetic response with our students and being able to care about them and humanize them. One of the main things that I saw with mentoring too, that I thought was a great idea, and Dr. Frank Harris speaks about this too, is having student mentors that have gone through a lot in their lives or have been especially resilient in this time, right? Being able to say, hey, so this is a great example of an A paper, but let me tell you how this student got to this A paper. It wasn't just by one written response, right? They are a single parent. They had to connect with all of these people. We've been working on this for weeks so that people feel like they do belong, that it's not easy, that people don't just show up and get A's and don't show up and graduate, but they work through it, and showing them, hey, can I connect you with this other student who has gone through the same things that you have gone through? And having that vulnerability and that authenticity of saying like, hey, even my own journey to being able to teach this class was a rocky one, but we can get through it together. And I think that's a really important part, so that they know that we're not on this high pedestal of teaching content, but really we all are going through this, and especially through COVID times, and student parents that are having screaming children in the back. I know that I often have screaming children in the back of my videos, and it's what we are all going through. So using also that starfish GPS and email, and reaching out to people and saying, hey, I noticed you weren't here in class, or you haven't shown up. What is going on? How can I connect with you? The second part that I really enjoyed of NCORE was being able to having students express themselves in other forms other than written communication. I absolutely love this. One of my favorite conferences was actually embodying hip hop as a professional practice in higher education. That was one of the best sessions I have been to, and it's something we can absolutely implement right away inside and outside. Having students connect with us And being that vulnerable right away is difficult. I don't know you, you don't know me, but let me give you a psalm that really shows where I came from, or let me give you a poem that I feel really embodies who I am. So being able to connect, not just in written form, but hey, in our introductions in our classes, do you want to play your favorite song for me? Do you want to play a song of where you grew up? Who's your favorite artist? Why? How do you connect with them, right? So being able to not just say, hey, give us a written introduction, or even through the Google Docs. I know you want to tell me something, but if it's really hard for you right now, do you want to send me a poem? Do you want to send me a YouTube link, a video of yourself playing a song that you wrote? So I thought that was pretty amazing, using music and alternative forms of communication to connect to one another, to build that community. Having people paint, draw, tell me what your day was like and why. Well, if I know I've been through a huge trauma lately, I'm gonna have a really difficult time talking about it. So connecting as a community, hey, this is what I drew today. Looks really traumatic because it was, right? This is a psalm that I really connect to. So building that community through psalm, through art, through poem, and taking the time to see, all right, I know that you are going through a lot. And like all of us, I'm sure none of us want to talk a lot when we're going through something unless we really know the person. So coming in as a professor and saying like, hey, I need you to tell me all of this right now so I can help you, could be a barrier, because like all of us, it's difficult to talk about sometimes what we're going through. So using those alternative forms, building that community, reaching out, but also following through. Hey, I noticed that at the beginning of the semester, you were right on top of it. I know that you're going through a lot. Let me connect with you. But if you're not quite comfortable with me, can I connect you with a student who has also gone through what you have gone through? And even if that student didn't get A's in your class, that's okay. Having that student that has been resilient, I'm just so proud of you for getting a passing grade. I know you've taken this class 3 times. I know that this student would love to hear your story because this is what they're going through also. And being vulnerable and saying, yeah, you know what? I haven't gone through what you've gone through. I haven't walked this path, but let me connect you with someone that has. How is my time? I feel like one more minute. Okay, I think I'm up, sorry.
No problem. Thank you so much, Emily. Oh, wait, there I am. Okay. So questions for Emily, and it looks like we're gonna have plenty of time for questions. So I'm excited about that. I hope you have some that are percolating as you're reflecting on what people have to say. But first, we have one last presenter, and I would like to introduce Nate.
Thanks, Jessica. Thank you, everybody, for attending this workshop. Thanks for being here to talk about equity and to share our experiences. My name's Nate. I teach art history in the art department. I'm your former academic senate president. I'm actually going to tell you a story about my journey with assessments and deadlines over the course of teaching online during the pandemic. And maybe you will have questions. Maybe it will be controversial. It does inspire conversation with all kinds of people that I talk about it with. So when we went towards the pandemic, my old class assessment techniques were not going to work. They just were not at all. Like my old techniques were literally 3 kind of thesis papers, which I would scaffold and model in class, and 2, a midterm and a final, traditional art history tests. And you probably maybe even know what those traditional tests are like. They're highly fetishized in my discipline. You memorize slides, you make flashcards, you memorize the artist, title, date, material, that's your mantra. And then you do slide IDs and you write essays in a 1.5 hour period where you're required to write like thousands of words at once and better know how to do that. And that's how I assess my students. And I produced a kind of distribution. I still had a lot of A's and B's, but there were always failures and D's and things like that. That slide test was not going to work for some people ever. It didn't when I was in school. It worked for me, but it didn't work for a lot of people in my class at Boston College. I remember them getting C's, failing out of art history. And it doesn't work in 2021 either. It didn't work in 2002. It didn't work in 2021. So I realized that 5 assessments and these types of assessments, these types of time tests, and this thesis kind of paper was not going to keep my students in the river. What I'm concerned about in the online format is like time spent, right? I'm a marathon runner. It's like, the more you train, the faster you get. Like, no matter who you are, no matter where you start, the more you train, the faster you get, right? And of course, some people have more time to train than others, X, Y, Z. There's all kinds of different situations and people have different bodies. But the more you train, the more you get. And so I want to keep people engaged with my class, watching the videos, watching my optional lectures. It's designed to be asynchronous, but I do appear live once a week and invite students to come and chat. It happens at different times so that different schedules can be accommodated. And I've heard and noticed that students are watching these videos also at night instead of perhaps watching Netflix. They can just watch art history. And what I realized is I needed a lot of assignments, right? Different types of assignments, smaller assignments, formative and summative assignments. And now in that same class, there's 42 assignments. They're much smaller. Some are discussion based. Some are find a medieval painting from these years painted in this geographical region and write a short description about it. And when I do that, I always do it first, right? So I find the painting from the blah, 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 and I write a short description about it and include it in the module so they can literally copy my format, right? Because it's not a secret, right? Comparing paintings is a skill that you get better with at time, but it isn't rocket science, right? At the entry level of art history, right? I mean, art historical research at the PhD level is quite complex, right? But comparing two paintings, right, a lot of people can do. And so they have all these assignments more, and there's a lot more of them. What I realized is that the deadlines were starting to stress people out, because now in a class that's only 8 weeks long, many of my classes are 8 weeks, 12 weeks, all different time frames, right, within the 16. People are getting stressed out. This Friday, I have these 3 little assignments due, and they're sending me emails, and I'm writing millions of emails, and I'm saying things like, don't worry about it, right, because my assignments were open anyways, just pass it in, a little late. And the students who would ask would get this special papal dispensation of me, accepting late assignments. And those that didn't, right, because they were too afraid or they didn't want to approach me, which was many, would just not do the assignment, right, and take the hit and their points. And what I realized is here is a hidden curriculum, right? If you have the wherewithal to ask me to have another week, you can have it. And if you don't, you just take the hit. So I said to myself, why do I have these deadlines for a 2-month class with 42 assignments, right? Why don't I be real with them and say, listen, you've got a lot of work to do. I've got a lot of grading to do. I'm going to suggest a due date for you, which is here. And a lot of people don't realize it's just a suggestion. And I'm like, yes, the syllabus, the welcome video, the welcome email. My first lecture, I explained the other, but whatever, I'm very patient, and what I found is in my Canvas analytics is that 75% of my students keep up with the deadlines. They basically keep up with the deadlines and are able to self-regulate the deadline and pass in work. Sometimes they'll pass it in a couple days late, sometimes a little early. For about, 10% of the students, right, they're last minute, people who are in that last week, pressing that red panic button and trying to produce as much work as possible. I mean, I used to do that for some of my research paper oriented classes too, to be quite honest. And they get through with like a B or, something like that, a C. And then for some students, and these are like 15% of the students, it doesn't work that well. And they're not passing in work. I'm reaching out to them, but I'm just kind of losing them in the stream. And that's the group, that's the population that I'm going to use GPS more aggressively with this coming semester to make sure that when they're not passing in work, week 2, week 4, week 6, week 8, they're constantly getting reminders that they need to be passing work, but they're not being penalized. It has not changed my grade distribution all that much. It has not, I think they are producing better written work in this format, much more words produced. And that's the other thing my class is designed. Get over your fears of writing. This isn't a precious, you're not writing a Bible. This is not a precious, right? We're writing some essays here. Do you know what I mean? Let's pump them out, right? And it has been a space of abundance, I think, for them, and they really appreciate it. I'm treating them, I think, like I was treated in college too, which was with a lot of space to chart my own deadlines and things like that. I never really had, and it works for my material, right, as well. And they're doing more work, I think, than I did in my intro classes. They're getting a better, more equitable experience because the diversity of assessment is allowing them to demonstrate their knowledge in different ways by finding images, by creating galleries, discussions, writing essays. Some of the assignments are more like vocab worksheet, right? Like here are the Renaissance vocab words, and some are a little bit more nuts and bolts. And it's produced a totally different kind of environment, and I think it's been successful for both me and them. And I wonder, as I think about going back on ground for the spring, right, how now does this change my on-ground class? Because I'm never going back to the memorization test again. And so it's kind of like, tweaking the different assignments and making them speak to the students and creating like really fun bomb assignments that people want to do, that are creative and engaging. And it's really been, I'm looking forward to EGC, which I'm participating in, because I'm hoping that content-wise, that's going to help me even further to create engaging students for our Black and Latinx students, all of our students, and to be able to use art in a way. And I'm lucky too, right? Because art history is one of those disciplines where it's like, yes, the first assignment is share your favorite artist and write about the work. And then I get to share my favorite artist, and I do, all those kinds of things. But so I guess my lecture, my little spiel is to say, like, don't be afraid to experiment. And every assignment has rubrics. It's all very spelled out. But don't be afraid to experiment, see what works. I thought that the sky was going to fall, and that, like, but honestly, it just created less stress, and people seem to be responding well. And I have to write a lot less emails and can focus on the teaching of the content and material and the mentoring, which is what I want to focus on. My last thing, and I know I've gone over my time, is that it's that time of year where students are trying to find full-time club advisors. And when we're talking about outside of the classroom, I was the advisor when I first got on campus to the Organic Learning Garden. Then I was a foundational advisor to the Gender Sexuality Alliance, which is now head up by Professors Yamaset Westerbond and Steph Anderson, who do amazing work. And I kind of missed being a club advisor, because a lot of my relationship with students, I realized, because I stopped during the last couple of years of my Senate presidency, was via the club, and they would take my classes. We would write transfer essays together. We would work on those types of things. And without that piece, I was kind of missing a kind of link in my student and serving students outside the classroom. They're going to be asking, because it's the beginning of the year, I was asked by a former student, so from my class already, continuing that relationship, to be the advisor of the Samburu Club, which is an organization that seeks to bring water resources and sustainability to a region, the Samburu region of northern Nigeria. Didn't know anything about the organization or the club, read up on it, and contacted the student. I'm going to do it. It's a great organization. But more importantly, right, these students want to be engaged with this social justice project, and I want to engage with them. I don't really care what I do, you know what I mean? It's not as important what it is. It is a great project. I just want to be there to know, like, yeah, here's how you do advocacy. Like, here's how you raise money. Here's how you do like a marketing campaign. Not that I know like that much about all that stuff, but like, to help them do that is another great thing that we can do. And it's fun. The most fun thing is to be in direct contact with students. That's what my whole journey of leadership taught me. And so the more we can do to be in front of them on Zoom in person, the better. Thank you.
So Nate, there are already a couple of questions in the chat, and I thought I would also say that if anyone would like to pose a question to any of the presenters, you can put it, there are quite a few of us here, but you can put them in the chat, or you can raise your hand, and me and my co-host will help do the best we can to get to you. But there are a couple of questions specifically about your ideas. And one is, how do you set up assignments with the suggested deadline? Do they have to reopen each assignment before they are ready to submit?
No, the way I do it is that I set all the deadlines for the last day of class when I set up the module. So everything is like the last Friday to give me at least, a week to do the grading. So everything is the last Friday of class. And I make it, so it never closes. So the suggested deadline is there, but it never closes, and they know they can just open it at any time. So everything has a date next to it. They know it never closes. You can always go in to use it, and you will not be penalized. It just stays open.
And then there's another question, and then Mars, I see you too. There's a question in the chat. I love the notion of suggestive deadlines. How does keeping flexible due dates prepare them for the real life?
That's that's a great question. Thanks, Amina, and for reading it, Jessica. Well, I think about my job, and there certainly are deadlines. We all have deadlines, right? But I don't have like a weekly deadline for an 8-week class. I mean, I have like a meeting agenda to put together, but I would get away from the fact that there are no deadlines, right? Like I have 2 8-week classes starting Monday. They have 2 months to do all the stuff. I think my real concern is more about how can I provide feedback that's meaningful within that paradigm, right? Less so like the real world. I mean, the real world's tough. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't, like, you know, sometimes, but like, I think that my real thing is like, I tell them up front, like, if you want assessments that are going to help you get better and better, obviously you need to give me something, right? Because if you give me everything at the end and it's just kind of tepid or it's not that great, you don't have any time to come back from that. And so there is a responsibility there. But what I really want to emphasize is that like basically people aren't just opting out, because what used to happen before is before the withdrawal deadline, they used to be like, I didn't pass in 5 assignments. And so that means my grade's a C. So I'm just dropping this class. And it's just kind of like, what a waste of like that whole time period and like everything really, right? When you could have just like had an extra 2 weeks to do the assignment, pulled through, you had Saturday and Sunday, you spent 6 hours a day, and now you're caught up. To me, it's like it's the disqualifications, and maybe that is what the real world is like, right? But as Walter was saying, right, I'm trying to build the world I want to live in, and I'm hoping that if I treat my students this way, right, they will treat their employees this way. I mean, we're looking at the workplace, and everybody's like, not our workplace is great, but like all these millennials are like, forget it. Right. My partner was like, forget it, quit his job. They were like, this institution is not, you know, for me. Like, and so people are not going to, you know, if we don't provide those spaces, I mean, people are going to opt out, do other things, and we'll be left in an empty, dusty castle. Like, and so, you know, it's about creating that world. And I don't know, I think that it's, there's pros and cons, right? Like there is to a lot of things, and it's about weighing that for your classroom and students and finding something that works in that space.
Can I jump in on that one and provide a slightly different perspective?
Yes, Greg, please do.
You know, from a class that's more sequential and fundamental, where each chapter builds on the other. So I teach accounting. And so there are some ways in which you absolutely have to really protect people from themselves. I'm a procrastinator. So if it wasn't for deadlines, my house would never get cleaned up. If somebody wasn't coming over to visit, we'd never clean the house, you know, but it's like, oh, so-and-so's coming over on Thursday. And so now the house gets spotless. And I think that's what some, not all students would do. If everything in my discipline was left to the end, then you would kind of have a really difficult time meeting whatever assessments along the way. And also having the very important conversations that you need to have over the material if students aren't able to do that. So one of the ways that I would apply that equity, you know, going back to what Nate's saying, is maybe I might have, and we have some great tools in Connect where I can post an assignment and it's as of this date. But then if you turn in the assignment by this date, maybe there's a reduction, because we do want students to know that in the business sector, there are some penalties that come or some consequences that come with not meeting the deadlines, but we may not want them to be, you know, terminal consequences. Maybe it's a smaller reduction of sorts, or they even have some tools in Connect where you can reduce, you know, the amount of credit that you can get by day until it maybe goes down to 0 by next Friday. So that's just another perspective in terms of trying to make sure that absolutely the material that needs to be learned on a constant basis is not necessarily terminal, but it's also allowing students to realize that we're trying to give you some other practice that will help you along the way.
I love that, Greg. And the reason why I like it is like what you're saying about it's not terminal, because we just don't want the student to leave, right? Because that's the worst outcome. A student that is gone from our institution, right? And so to make it so that they always have the chance to come back and to sort of, you know, even if it is at a consequence, right? That's better than just being like, you don't have the opportunity, because that's right, because we just don't want them to leave the door.
So thank you both very much. Mars, you have a question. Thanks for being patient.
Oh, sure. I have a couple of comments and a question. I teach in the business department as well, and I have so much appreciation for this conversation. Nate, thank you for throwing in there the idea that we're building the world that we want to live in. To me, that kind of harks back to Gandhi a little bit. And I really, really love that perspective. And David, the Oscar Wilde quote certainly rings true in my personal life. If it wasn't for the last minute, nothing would get done. However, I also try to think about the idea that in my student learning objectives, our student learning objectives in my classes are not that we're preparing students for the real world per se. We're trying to inculcate mastery of the concepts. And students haven't mastered the concepts. None of the concepts is be ready for a real world with your boss is going to fire you if you don't meet certain deadlines, or you get demoted if there aren't certain deadlines. The student learning outcomes are things like be a creative problem solver, have analytical skills, or things like that. The student learning outcomes are almost never be ready for the real world, even in a business environment. So I really appreciated all the different perspectives, and I circle back to the student learning outcomes, which even in business are never ever be ready for the real world. So I feel some real pushback about the idea of getting people ready for the real world, because the real world will come at them, and they'll make their job choices based on the world that they want to live in. As Nate said, his partner said, they're not going to go for jobs, or they're going to quit jobs that don't meet the life that they want to live. But that wasn't where I originally raised my hand, because I wanted to circle back to something that Walter said about Ron, the former chair of the art department. Walter, I was unclear about the idea of, you said, I think that Ron said that, and this is in the interest of not repeating a potential microaggression, that I'm guessing that if you as a white man met the eyes and smiled at a black man, it would be creepy or a microaggression in some way. I was puzzled by that, and I was hoping maybe you could address that so that I or anybody else doesn't repeat that. What exactly?
I think it was Ron being quirky, and he had a way of approaching things at oblique angles and looking at the opposite. And it was sort of like, it would be so strange, because if you're used to everyone not looking at you and being sort of invisible, and then all of a sudden a tall white man who looks like the man, because I wear collared shirts and I wear my blazer, looks right, it might be more disconcerting, like, why is he looking at me and smiling? And sort of like, that's such a strange thing, and it would seem unnatural. And so that's where I said afterwards, like, I just have to be me and be natural with everyone and include everyone. So not just include, and then I'll be okay. That was my takeaway from it, that I don't get to control other people's reactions to me. And so I just have to have like the joy and love in my heart and be okay if it gets misread or anything. And that's where I got into the apology and just saying, yeah, like if anything I did came across in any way, please forgive me, right? It's not my intention. And it might've just been me in that moment.
So basically, all being our authentic selves, assuming our authentic selves are loving and open-minded, is probably the best strategy to avoid microaggressions.
And be okay that I might make I absolutely will, right? I absolutely will make mistakes and say something that's not the right thing to say, or do something. And just as soon as someone else reacts to it, their reaction, to not dismiss it and to acknowledge Ron's reaction, be like, hey, if that happened, that would not be my intention, and I would try to do something different, right? In some ways, you just have to say, hey, that wasn't my intention. But sometimes that's not enough, and you have to just move forward. That's the way I was thinking about it.
Got it. Thank you for
to not take things so personally, right? To not be so worried about being called racist. And I'm in the battle. If I'm in the job of fighting racism and someone calls me racist, what can I learn from it and keep moving forward and not get so caught up in who cares, right? I don't need to solve that problem. If I came across that way that I didn't want to, I'm not going to take it personally, and I'm going to work harder to not make that microaggression or overt aggression in the future. That's, I guess, my goal.
So I just want to say, I'm so sorry, because I think we're just kind of like just getting warmed up right now. I can see people like having thinking about having additional comments, but we are running out of time. And so I wanted to just know if there's like if someone would like to, I know Walter, your hand was up. If anyone has kind of a closing thought, but we do, I'm so sorry. We do need to wrap up because we have more sessions at 2 o'clock.
Yeah, I have something really quick. It's
That
very
would be great.
practical, but it's something that Emily said that just made me realize like something
Great.
that we're talking about tips, and I think something that has really helped me in the classroom in terms of relating to my students. It's Emily was saying, we should be vulnerable with our students. And with that said, what I do within like the first 2-3 weeks of class is I'll provide literally like a 10-minute presentation on my life, but literally add pictures of myself as a child with my parents, things that really the students, they see me as a human being, as someone that they could relate to. So I would highly suggest all of you to do that. It doesn't take a lot of time, but it actually allows you also to process what you want to share. And it might make you realize that we don't share enough sometimes with our students. So I just wanted to provide that practical point because I think it's just really something that's really helped in terms of connecting with my students.
Thank you so much, Paul. That's a great way to close out our session. Thank you so much, everyone. Again, I'm really sorry. I think we're just getting warmed up, but we do have other things on deck. So I just want to say thank you so much to our presenters for taking the time to share and be vulnerable with us. And thank you, everyone, for attending. And we hope you enjoy the rest of the afternoon. Bye, everyone.
All right, thank you. Thanks,
Thank
Jessica.
you.
Bye,
Good
everybody.
job.
Thank you so much,
Thank you.
everybody.
Bye-bye. Thank
Thanks,
you.
Jessica. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
All right,
Bye.
guys. Great job. Thank you.